Transnet Engineering Industry Day, and I'm joined by Wilson. How is Africa?
Well, Africa is Africa, right? The most exciting continent to be on. Lots of growth opportunities. So we're very excited.
Okay, so what have you been up to specifically in Africa? I know Botswana.
Yeah.
What's happening in Botswana?
We're collaborating with Botswana Railway to build a new cross-border railway from Mmamabula to Lephalale. It's about 120 kilometers long, but really it's a very strategic railway which is going to link Botswana's mines all the way to the ports of Richards Bay, Maputo.
Where does Eswatini fit in all of that?
Eswatini is part of the extended corridor that can then give us an alternative to get to Maputo or to Richards Bay. So that's how it's part of that whole broad corridor that we conceived of more than a decade ago, and now we're beginning to put it into motion. Very exciting times.
So we've had the investment conference.
Yeah.
There's definitely interest.
Yeah.
Is there money? Are we at that point
There's
yet?
money. Botswana Railways in particular is in the process of appointing a transaction advisor to help us, with the transaction structuring, and then also to help us put together the RFP for external partner selection. But in the conference itself, there was absolute and categorical, what's the word I'm looking for? Commitment, interest and commitment. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
The banks were like, money is not the problem.
Yeah.
Get moving. And that's where we are.
Okay. So when do you think you're going to kind of, break ground?
By a rough order of magnitude, I would think maybe within the next, call it 24 to 30 months. We need to do the external partner selection and then do the feasibility studies. It's basically a bridge between Botswana's Cape Gauge network and South Africa. So it's got to be Cape Gauge in between.
The other African countries you're working in?
We're still very keenly working on the North-South corridor. And so one of the things in working together with the railway administrations on the corridor, one of the immediate needs that was identified was the need for rolling stock. So in establishing the rolling stock leasing company, it actually responds to that particular need. But ultimately, the idea is to improve access to rolling stock across the railway, across the regions, so that we can make sure that there's better movement and seamless movement of traffic up and down that corridor. Zambia, for example, a few years ago, implemented a statutory instrument on transport. And in that, where they need or they mandate at least 30% of traffic to be on rail.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think today, if you look at the numbers, it's less than 1%. Yeah. So the opportunities are quite significant.
For Zambia, that investment's coming.
Yes.
It's going to look completely different in about, less than 2 years' time, in my view.
Exactly.
So it means that by then the statutory instrument would have done its job.
Yes.
Once that track and rolling stock is
and then we just, so by plugging in rolling stock, which is one of the major requirements, we're then able to support effectively the realization of that statutory instrument.
You had an information session not so long ago.
Yep. There's
definitely keen interest. What for you have been some of the biggest highlights or questions that the industry has had for that?
I think when we were looking at it, so we put out certain criteria around which interested bidders need to comply with, financial and technical. And I think the industry response, gauging from how we interacted, in the main, there's really no major concern about that. The industry wanted to gain clarity on the role of TE, Transnet Engineering, in the LeaseCo. But I think in the main, the sense that I got when we finished the 2 briefing sessions was of very keen industry interest in supporting the LeaseCo. And so industry is quite keen to understand how soon are we going to go to market, when is the LeaseCo going to be up and running, what assets are we bringing on board, and all those kind of things. Those are some of the things that are really, the industry is geared for action. So that was a big concern.
So obviously where I stand and my interpretation is that Transnet Engineering is going to be doing the actual physical overhaul and refurbishment, to keep your factories busy. It's going to take some time. And I'm not sure if there's maybe a small misalignment between the slots already being open now and new players wanting to come in, and your process, well, it's not yours, it's like Wilson, okay, but it's Transnet's process. That's probably going to take 18 months to get to financial close? And then how long to fix all the rolling stock?
Well, the rolling stock exists, right? So part of the work that we're currently doing is to remember what we are contributing is, call it seed capital. The longer term future we see is of a growing LeaseCo with many more assets, right? So the partner that we're looking on board is going to be a growth-oriented partner. But immediately what we're going to do is when we kick off, we will then seed our current leases, and we estimate about half of the assets will already be leased out by the time we get to financial close. So all of those come into the LeaseCo. Therefore, when the LeaseCo gets up and running operationally, it already has a number of operational assets, and then it has other assets that need to be refurbished, manufactured, and so that's where then the role of TE becomes very important, because everything that we're doing today is laying the groundwork for all that work that needs to be done once we've finally got into financial close.
Do you believe that Transnet Engineering is able to handle that kind of volume, or are you also looking for that collaborative approach from a refurbishing and manufacturing perspective?
I personally think that this has to be a South African incorporated solution. And so as much as we as Transnet are seeking to leverage TE's capabilities, but we really are seeking to leverage the industrial capability within the country. So I see, as this chief executive of TE said earlier this morning, it's really about establishing partnerships. We see the LeaseCo as having a presence beyond the borders of South Africa, which means that wherever the LeaseCo goes, it will always require this technical support. Now, it could very well be that TE is not able to have a physical presence everywhere, and therefore strategic relationships become very important. I definitely see the room for partnerships. I mean, from just our experience of supporting assets that we have on lease in Zambia and Zimbabwe, already tells us that we need to rethink the model on how we're going to support those, right? So we cannot, as Transnet, then expect to be locally present in every jurisdiction. It just makes sense to then establish the partnerships that still allow us to be present and support the LeaseCo's requirements, as it were. So I definitely see this as being a collaborative effort in which Transnet Engineering establishes strategic partnerships and is then able to respond to the market. And several other opportunities for other customers within the market. Why not?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of mining companies becoming train operating companies in need of rolling stock. I mean, I'm
think
just saying.
No, I think so too. I think the market is changing. What we're seeing with the rail infrastructure manager is doing in opening up slots. So we're still waiting to see what's going to come out of that process. But I think there's very keen market interest. It's really, really exciting times. And I'm really excited that we are part of that journey where we in the LeaseCo will be supporting that development. My personal belief is that rolling stock ultimately should be a service and not a capital asset. So my personal mantra is rolling stock as a service.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that rolling stock is like, you got to take the cash out your pockets, off your balance sheets, go buy this massive investment.
All you do is say, this is the availability that I need, and we basically contract on availability, and that's the game that LeaseCo is going to be in. It's a game changer. You
ensure that I have the locomotive or the wagons that they run, they operate. If it doesn't, I give it back to you. It's like, renting.
It's a rental model, Phillippa. As a customer, your only interest is that, hey, this thing must work.
And it leaves you more money. For your OPEX at the end of the day.
Exactly. And that's
expanding that network.
We think that by doing so, we are going to flip this entire market on its head and really begin to achieve many of those changes financially and economically that we're looking for. So very exciting times.
The other interesting things about the rolling stock that you guys have is that a large majority of it is capable of running on the African network already. On the standard gauge side, it's immaterial because the network there is quite small. And you're not in that market anyway.
In time to come, as the LeaseCo matures, as standard gauge networks mature, then I think that there certainly will be an opportunity as well for LeaseCo to get into that space.